Welcome to Urban History. I'm
Yeah.
here with Arcadia and with Dom, and we're going to jump into talking about the Tank Busters tournament we went to. Was it 2 weeks ago or 1 week ago? I kind of forget now. I think it was
Well, a week and a half ago.
week and a half. So I was
Yeah.
kind of thinking the right kind of thing. Um, Yeah, so we're going to chat about our armies and all that. I played British, Dom played Germans, and Arcadia played the Yanks. So let's go in reverse alphabetical order. We'll start with Arcadia. USA. Why? Tell us about your army, why you picked it, that kind of jazz.
Um, I picked it. I'm not going to lie. The gyro stabilized veteran Sherman is a very big, attractive class.
Mm.
But I picked the primarily because for the best part of my childhood, teenage years, and adult life into uni, I've been obsessed with World War II cinema and watching American armor, watching American vehicles, and just getting a chance to actually deploy like a full field of Shermans with support vehicles just felt very attractive for the most part. So I ran veteran Easy 8, veteran Sherman, regular Sherman, a M16 meat chopper, an M18 Hellcat for a little bit of like corner sniper action, and then a couple of infantry based support teams like a mortar team and a 57 mil anti tank gun with appropriate tows and transports sort of backing them up. So I think I spread myself a little bit too thin across the areas. Like I didn't go all armor or all tank destroyer, but I mean, at the time before the tournament, I set up what I thought was a fairly balanced and well-rounded list. But it went differently to how expected on the day.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Dommy, you kind of had our most controversial army, so tell us about your Germans.
Well, controversial is definitely the way to describe it because, for multiple reasons, it's controversial. Because, I mean, anything German in World War II is controversial. But all that aside, because we are historical war gamers at the end of the day, um, the controversial side of my army from a bolt action perspective was the fact that I decided to take a King Tiger to a tournament, knowing darn well it's going to take up a third of my points. And I say a third because it was a 1,500 point list. Uh, and so I had a regular King Tiger leading the way as my command vehicle at 555 points.
580 points when you take in command vehicle as well.
Oh, that's true because I got to do the extra thing to give it the command vehicle stuff. So good pick up there. So um, yeah, there's certainly a big chunk of points gone from that. And then to fill out the rest of my army, we've got a Panzer IV I ran as with shirts and armor, which I paid for. Did not come into any use, but hey, I was ready. Um, is the only veteran in my list, and I ran it veteran purely because Panzer IVs in this tournament had a requirement to be veteran if you wanted to get Tiger Fear. And Tiger Fear is something that honestly did not come to use either. Because when it was applicable, everyone was too far away, and when it wasn't applicable, it was because they were being targeted. Otherwise, I had two Hetzers to round out the list, as well as a very experimental vehicle, because Germans are fun. And here's to add to the controversy. We had a Kugelblitz I ran regular, and so that one I had to do up leading about a week leading up to the tournament. Put a lot of work into it, and I'm certainly proud of that. But yeah, why I decided to run Germans otherwise is because hey, big cats, very fun in bolt action, and that's really it. There's no no other real rhyme or reason to it.
Yeah, cool. I guess that just leaves me. I ran the British 11th Armored Division, which was fun because British Armored divisions now have their own national characteristics choices, which are in one of the D-Day books. Yeah, so I ran 3 Comets, a Crusader AA, a Daimler armored car, a Piat team, a Jeep, and my free forward observer. And I kind of, well, originally I was going to be running the Finns, running the Lapis armored division. But then I played some practice games with my Finns, and every Finnish tank having the unreliable rule meant that I got pinned to heck before before I got to do anything. So I switched over to the Brits because I had a pair of Comet tanks sitting in my pile of shame. I don't actually have a late war British army, but the Comet's one of my favorite tanks. So I bought one Comet kit when Rubicon came out with them, and for some reason Rubicon sent me two. So thank you for the free Comet for some reason, Rubicon. Yeah, so I ran 3 Comets. It was pretty fun. I kind of modeled it on an army that did well in Tank Wars the last time around we did the tournament. Yeah, so we went to the tournament hosted by Western Front Gamers, our local club out at West Ryde, and got into the day. We played 3 games on the day. And well, we'll just go the same order. So let's go back to Arcadia. Why don't you tell us about your first game of the day?
I mean, my first game, or rather the first round of the tournament, left me feeling a bit defeated. I guess it sort of set the tone for the whole day. I had 10 order dice all up, and I went up against a very seasoned tournament player. And bear in mind, this is my second tournament ever. Bearing in mind, and actually, I should know it was my first time playing any Tank Wars games. I've never actually dipped my toe into the world of Tank Wars before, so this was a learning curve against a very strong competitor. And he ran I think it was a 15 dice, mostly inexperienced Japanese medium tank list. And I guess I made a few tactical errors first up with trying to tow my 57mm anti-tank gun further into the board rather than setting up in the corner and using it to use for area denial. And what really heaved me, not just in round 1, but across the day, is that my command vehicle, being the M4A3E8 Sherman modeled after Fury, not only kept getting targeted, primarily because it was probably the biggest, meanest tank that I had in my list, which is not saying much, but it kept getting destroyed in turn 1 every game, and that happened right from the get-go in this game, and it just sort of left me a bit hindered and a bit, I guess, tactically flustered for the full game. Weirdly enough, my only kill for the game came from targeting, I think it was a Japanese equivalent of an 88 field gun with the M16 with the quad 50s. And that was my only kill for the game. Everything else became attritional. It became almost borderline stalemate in a sense that I kept trying to move my limited amount of pieces up the board, and I had some really bad dice rolls and no command vehicle, and kept missing. And the inexperienced Japanese tanks kept moving up and targeting my stuff, and with that, all the additional hit markers he kept missing. So it was basically like 2 armies firing into the big blue sky at each other, not really hitting anything. So it almost just became a dice war of 1s, 2s, pretty much for an hour and a half, 2 hours. So nothing really much to say for my first game, apart from my command vehicle getting tonked in the first round and then just bleeding each other dry for the next 2 hours.
Yeah, and I suppose especially like when it becomes a dice war like you're talking about, it kind of has that big advantage that even though all his stuff's inexperienced, like he's got 15 dice. And so even though you're all just hitting on 1s and 2s, when you're rolling 15 1s or 2s, you're more likely to get one in there.
I mean, it does add to that, I guess, Yahtzee element of a dice game where eventually, statistically, a 5 or 6 is going to come up. It just so happened that 5 or 6 came from a medium tank front on shot against my easy 8 and completely just shredded it from the get go.
Yeah, and I mean, I had a similar moment in my game, although I'll get to that after we hear from Dom. But segueing there, Dom, tell us about how your Germans went.
Yeah, the first game, it's certainly the game in the tournament I will speak about the least because I was not pleased. I came up against one of the one of the big dogs in Western Front, and he certainly showed me why he was one of the big dogs. My list was torn apart by a 14 dice late war British, and I thought it would set the tone of, oh man, the 5 dice list has already it's already shown me why it's bad. I'm getting mauled here. I'm outnumbered, outflanked, outgunned. And what did not help is Lady Luck. I did not land a single shot until probably turn 4, maybe turn 3, but pretty much like I just could not move. I could not shoot. And by the time things started to kick off, it was too late for me. I couldn't advance beyond halfway. My tanks were wiped out one by one. Even the King Tiger got killed at a point, but thanks to the Tank Wars special rules, the abilities you give to your tank commanders, it meant that my King Tiger got the lucky, and so I got to roll, or rather, I got to mitigate, stop the damage table roll before it happened, and just ignore the hit. Which, I mean, it's the only reason why my King Tiger survived. But he ended up getting pinned. He reversed basically all the way back into my corner, and it was just a really sad image at the end of the game with 4 tanks blown up to pieces, and then supposedly the most intimidating tank cowering in the corner. It was a super duper defeat, to say the least.
Yeah, ouch. That does hurt. You talking about moving your tanks up the table reminded me. I haven't actually. None of us have actually said what the mission was. So the first mission we played was objectives. So there was I believe it was a D6 amount of objectives placed out on the table that you had to capture.
D3 plus 3.
D3 plus 3. Yeah. I ended up with 5 objectives on my table, which was fun. So my game, I guess, to talk about. So my game kind of had the opposite effect of your guys' games. My game kind of set me up with a lot of false confidence from the get-go. So I was also playing against a pretty decent player, who I'd actually played some practice games against earlier in the year. And so I came up against a late war Germans, literally Battle of Berlin. So he had SS Charlemagne, Brandenburgers, all that kind of juicy goodness, including a Sturmtiger, which was kind of like the meat and bones of his list. So it was a bit of a difficult start for us, but I got lucky with the dice draw. We both had 8 dice and we're pulling them out. I believe it was first wave deployment or something like that. If it wasn't first wave deployment, I had my Daimler in reserve and brought it on as soon as I could. I'm pretty sure it was first wave though. And my Daimler just got the last dice of the turn, and he'd moved his Sturmtiger up one of the flanks of the board. It was turned sideways, facing at one of my comets, and the Daimler drove right up the side, hit it. I think just got the glance on the damage table, and did the extra pins. But those 2 pins, then the Sturmtiger didn't throw for almost the entire game. And I think in a sense, that was kind of what set my game up for me to get a massive victory. To qualify what a massive victory is, it's actually a term there, not just me tooting my own horn. There was kind of 5 levels you could get. There was massive victory, close victory, draw, close defeat, and I can't remember what the bad defeat was. It was like crushing defeat or something like that. And basically, if you killed 600 odd points of your opponent's force and didn't lose more than 600 points of your force, you got the best victory. And the other stuff, you got the worst. I played on a very cool board where like one half of the board was effectively like a Middle Eastern city, and the other half of the board was like sand dunes around it. So one side was very open and one side was very closed. And in a sense, I managed to force all of his good tanks into the closed area while all my good tanks were out in the open area. So I was able to wreak havoc while keeping my tanks away from his. And so I managed to scrape away, capturing more objectives and knocking out some of his pretty good units, and came away with the massive victory, which at the end of round 1, I believe I was second on the I believe I was second on the table, which meant that when it came to round 2, I came up against one of the best players who plays bolt action. So wasn't fun for me, but yeah, let's go back to Arcadia and let's hear about your game 2. How did game 2 go for you? Oh, game 2, the game mode was sectors, I believe.
Yes, it was sectors, which is weirdly enough one of my favorite game modes to play. And on another element of weirdly enough, I think having been crushingly defeated in my first game, went up against your first opponent with the Sturmtiger. And so I was probably audibly gulping when I was reading this gentleman's army list with Charlemagne, all the different types of commandos, with Panzerfausts, up against my Shermans with like notoriously weak sides, and a thin armored Hellcat. And I deployed, I set up. I actually, what I thought was rather ingeniously set up a fanning deployment where all my vehicles could just leach into all the other sectors and then just hold ground behind cover. My curse of the Fury struck again with the opponent's Sturmtiger, not just necessarily targeting my Easy 8, but using his tournament crew skill of Adrenaline Rush, which gives a second main gun shot at the same target, meaning that my Easy 8 was targeted by 2 consecutive, very well rolling, high damage pinning Sturmtiger shots at like half range, essentially wiping it off the board on turn 1. I think just with the amount of rocket, propel, I guess grenade or shell damage that he did, he just turned my Easy 8 into smithereens. But I had a little bit of success in the sense that my M16 did its job in the anti-infantry role and crept up around corner, and with 12 shots of +1 pen heavy machine gun shots, just absolutely evaporated the Charlemagne and Brandenburger commandos. Even going down, it just absolutely tore them to shreds to the point where they started having to take half team loss or morale checks, which did feel good after my first game, I will admit. But then trying to get sectors-based obtuse shots on the Storm Tiger with other tanks that I had left just proved uneventful, just with really bad rolls and just missed when I probably should have hit. And at the end of it, I think I lost the sectors game, even rushing a lot of my units into his quarter, just on kill points alone, just because his Storm Tiger just evaporated, not just the Easy 8, but my M4 Tow, and half track. It just targeted stuff and just evaporated off the board, added to the kill points, and yeah, it went into round 3 on 0 tournament points, which was mildly frustrating to say the least.
Yeah, I can imagine so. And I mean, it's kind of awkward that, well, not awkward. What's the word? Kind of ironic in a sense that in my game, his Sturmtiger did nothing, whereas in your game, the Sturmtiger ended up just being effectively the man of the match, or tank of the match, I guess.
Well, I think with the damage that the Storm Tiger did in my round 2, it probably could have taken away very easily, like man of the tournament. It did its job very effectively against. I thought they were concealed, but then discussions were had about cover, and they weren't.
Mm.
And it was my second game on this board, and I was sort of itching to get off this board and try different terrain. But yeah, that Storm Tiger was just the biggest thorn under my saddle, I guess, for the whole day, because I also had adrenaline rush on my Fury. So I was kind of hoping to try and like push up the middle and use 2 shots of 76 mil sort of armor piercing against any of his targets, like a Panzer IV or his Howling Cows, or just something to evaporate, get a very easy kill point, and stack up the sectors points. But I just couldn't. I was hemmed in by the Storm Tiger.
Yeah. Dom, you had a better second game than Arcadia or I. Tell us, how did the King Tiger and friends go?
Oh man, did they ever go? Because yeah, saying I had a better second game than the two of you is certainly putting it lightly. I pretty much had the opposite experience, the polar opposite. I ended up coming out of that second game with the maximum points. The 20 points for the massive victory, and an extra 1 point for my command vehicle surviving, but a command point as well for destroying my opponent's command vehicle. And yeah, I came up against a US list, and the benefit of losing the first round in the tournament in terrible fashion means you'll face someone who also lost the first round in terrible fashion, and that generally ends up being a new player. And so here, this bloke, he's not unfamiliar with wargaming as a whole, and so he still has a mind for strategy and etc. Just his hitting zone is not yet in the bolt action realm. He put up a pretty valiant fight, all things considered, but at the end of the day, when you're half working on just figuring out how the game works versus myself, who tends to perform well in the sectors game mode, especially late game, where it's just like, all right, sweet, let's just get everything, let's just run everything and rack up points, and just use that as a distraction for my opponent to just keep shooting me, but forget to move, and yeah, the thing is, I didn't actually win based on my usual sector strategy of let's just kind of pin him down a little bit and then run at the very last minute. Because of the dice disadvantage, once again, my opponent came in with somewhere around 10 to 12 order dice. And despite the fact that I probably wiped half of them out, and in quick order especially, he had a bit of a convoy going on the main road. And so I just blew up the things at the front pretty quickly. But as well, the kill points is actually what got me over the line, because he basically did my strategy against me. He just ran everything at the last moment. But even though I had like most of my army across pretty much in the maximum point zone, he just had to get only a couple of his units to tie me on those points. And so It's just the fact that I had more dice to kill and easier dice to kill in soft skin vehicles and etc. That got me over the line. But it was certainly a commanding victory for the Germans. The King Tiger, although the Tiger Fear rule did not come into effect at all, or actually, I think it came into effect like maybe once out in the whole game. The Tiger Fear was definitely instilled in my opponents because, yeah, pretty much when my Tiger just crept around the corner on the main road, everything just went to heck for him. He's too terrified to face it, but when he did face it, he realized the absolute power of it, the ultimate defense, if you will, being a super heavy tank and bolt action. But alas, a far better game for me in the second round than the first round, which set me up very well for the rest of the tournament.
Yeah, indeed. And I actually got to watch quite a lot of your second game, Dom, because I got tabled in 20 minutes. Which, coming off of my first game where I had a hard fought, like don't mishear me, it was hard fought, but it was a big win. Coming off of that into my second game, where to just get annihilated so quickly too was very disheartening. It was a list that probably looks more like a normal bolt action list than a tank wars list. SAS everywhere. The majority of the army was the soft skin trucks with the rear facing light anti-tank guns. And I think he had a Grant and a Crusader to back those up. But what really killed me, we were both playing British. My artillery barrage comes in and, I get a handful of pins here and there. His artillery barrage comes in and it gets the maximum pins on all my vehicles that are on the table. I had a couple in reserve. And then we kick into the next turn. I fail my order tests, and he just starts landing hits with these light anti-tank guns that they can't get through the front armor on the Comet. Like, you need to roll 4 6s in a row kind of thing to be doing it. But he doesn't need to. As long as he's hitting, he can put a pin on him. And he didn't, as far as I remember, he didn't score a single penetrating hit on any of my vehicles. But he knocked out a Comet on turn 2 by putting 10 pins on it. So it was a very quick game. And we got to the start of turn 3, and because it was sectors, I'm looking at the board, and he already has more units in my sector than I can kill before the game ends, assuming we go to a turn 7. So yeah, it was game over there. And yeah, it was a very crushing defeat and a very humbling experience that, even though my Comets have really great armor, for those who don't know the stats of the Comet, it's a medium tank, so armor 9, but it's got a special rule that gives it front armor 10. And it's got a super heavy anti-tank gun on it. And so despite how good that was, when it gets hit by 6 light anti-tank guns in a turn, like, that armor 10 doesn't matter. So my game was over very quickly, and I got to walk around and have a look at some of the other games, and I watched your game a lot, Dom, which was fun for me because, I enjoy seeing any of us lads from Urban History do well. But at the end of round 2, with myself on 22 points and Dom on 22 points, we were 10th and 11th on the ladder, equal 10th, I believe, which meant we came up against each other in the last round. But before we chat about that, Arcadia, why don't we check in and see how your last game went?
Okay, my third game. I think it's incredibly lovely that Western Front Gamers has, I guess, a friendlier a friendlier round or a friendlier opponent for those who are, I guess, struggling with a competition. And like, I'll happily admit, I was on struggle street. I've only played one tournament before, and that was actually Western Front Gamers' Codswallop in October last year, which is a very different game. And I found myself on struggle street, and they had a friendlier round to just sort of like, I guess, temper the experience that I was having. And I was up against the list that was essentially American on American. It was a very challenging list in the sense that it was very different to mine, and that a lot more was regular and not veteran. And in this game, I guess I kind of learned about the cost, value, or otherwise of the gyro stabilizer, and when it should be used, when it should be invested in. As even with almost a similar but extended list compared to mine, I again kind of struggled a little bit. The Curse of the Fury struck again when a regular Hellcat hit side armor on my Easy 8 and completely blew it to smithereens on turn 1. But I managed to mobilize a lot more of my infantry units, and at this point in the tournament, I was sort of going for what would be called meme or trick shots, things that are so improbable. But I was at a point of the day, and I was admittedly tired and like getting a bit antsy about the way I was going during the day, and just doing trick shots. I'm like, look, this would be hilarious if I pulled it off, but I'm not going to be surprised if it fails. And weirdly enough, pulling meme shots started to work as I dropped a medium mortar, rolling on a 6, shot down the guts of an M18 Hellcat, and virtually knocked out with, I guess, what would be the equivalent of one dude hanging around the tank just trying to like operate it. I used my M16 to take out any infantry that were operating on the field. So I guess for me, by turn 3, it was very clear that the M16 I learned by turn 3 was very, very effective at anti-infantry roles. And weirdly enough, I took it as an anti-aircraft role, which was its historical role. Any infantry unit that was on the board by turn 3, I was just crushing, even in cover when they go down. That extra +1 pen just really tends to help. But I was just pulling meme trick shots, doing things that I would find funny if they worked. But towards the end of the round, I actually got to use one of my crew skills, which is push forward. In that, when one of my veteran Shermans was forced to go down, I activated it, and I managed to actually advance and take another shot at one of their Shermans, and start pinning other units to hell to the point where they started grinding to a halt. And so I sort of managed to edge out a notable but not a decisive victory towards the end. But overall, it was a better game, tactically, strategically. I guess I kind of hit the ground running a little bit with actually using my tanks in a proper format. Running a British list was tank busters with 2 platoons, Churchill, Cromwell, M10 in 1 platoon, a Firefly, Sherman V, British Airborne Recce Jeep, Light Artillery, and Brent Carrier.
If this tournament taught us something, is that would have been a great idea because the top 3 were British.
Yeah, and it's like I should have gone it, but the notion of gyro stabilized veteran stuff was just too attractive, and I think it just like absolutely wrecked me.
Which, I mean, like, it's just at the end of the day, it's a two-edged sword making that choosing those lists. Because, like, here's the thing: in regular bolt action tournaments, outside of your like ridiculous Japanese lists and other things like that, US are generally the best army. It's just a matter of using.
Well,
it
here's the
properly.
thing. I was actually originally in talks with Ian. Pardon me, when I was originally looking at lining this up, and I was this close to running a Panzer Brigade 150 list.
That would have been mad.
You would add some good fun on
Just like with
you would have good fun on turn 1 and 2 where your enemy's gotta be, was it rolling order tests or something to see if they can actually shoot you or see you or something like that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
some whack
and
things.
and it was mandating that I take infantry units, and I was going to take infiltration squads, which have to be identified separately.
Yeah, dang, that would have been a killer. And I guess one thing, Arcadia, is that especially when you do get chance to play bolt action, is you're almost always playing paratroopers, and so tanks, not just being new to tank wars, but also not so much new to tanks in general, but tanks in general are something you don't normally run a lot of in paratrooper lists, and so yeah, I guess it's a steep learning curve, but I think that's one thing I value about tournaments is getting to do that fun learning curve, especially tournaments that Western Front run, because like 99% of people there are great people. And so it's not like a cutthroat tournament where you're just going to have a terrible time while trying to learn how to do it, but you're going to have a good time, even though you might get smashed.
Well, I mean, like, absolute credit to the people of Western Front Games or gamers. I premised every opponent that I came across that I had not played bolt action in quite a few months due to a new job and finishing uni and all the fun stuff that life provides, just in getting in the way of actually enjoying a good game of bolty. And everyone, all the club members were super supportive and super, nice about it. Like you said, it wasn't a cutthroat tournament. It wasn't, take all glory and everything like that. And just even from conversations from the other members and even some of my opponents mid game from the club, I learned a lot, not just about tank wars, but even how to use some of my units that, like I mentioned earlier, the first time I've used them.
Mm. So Dom and I came up against each other in classic Western Front Gamers Urban History tradition, where every time the Urban History crew have gone out to a Western Front Gamers tournament, Dom and I have ended up in the last round against each other because we've ended up at equal spottings on the ladder. So,
And it's always in the third round as well. That's just another wild coincidence in there.
yeah, always in the third round, because I think one of the tournaments we went to had 5 rounds, and we ended up playing each other in the third round.
It was Cod Swallop, where it was a 4 rounds.
Four.
But yes, we lined up against each other in the third round, and ended up drawing. And so we went into the fourth round still on pretty level terms.
Yeah. But a draw this time round it was not.
Oh, was it not?
Yeah. So I think both of us kind of set our armies up well. I had 2 comets facing down his King Tiger, and he had Dom killed my 3rd comet as soon as it came on. So we had a first wave deployment, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the last game of the tournament was just a kill points game. But we had a first wave deployment.
It was, yeah. It was just kill or be killed.
Yeah. We had a first wave deployment, and we pull out dice, putting it on our reserves, so we don't have to, putting them on my reserves because I don't think you had reserves. And putting units sneakily hidden, and then it was kind of like I got the first dice where you can't really hide a unit, and so I was like, all right, well, you know what? I know I'm gonna have to fight a King Tiger. I don't want to shoot it at long range. I want to get into half range so I can, knock get that little extra penetration against its frontal armor or its side armor or whatever it is I'm going to end up shooting at. And so I'm like, all right, I'm going to run one of my comets down the middle because this is the comet that has the ability that it can shoot twice. I want to run it down the middle, get it close to the king tiger, and bang, bang. And so I run it on the table, get it up nice and far on the road, and Dom pulls a dice, gets his Hetzer out, needs to hit on a 5, penetrate on a 5. Penetrate on a 6, glance on a 5, penetrates and knocks it out and blocks the road for the rest of my stuff that's in reserve.
The little Hetzer that could, hey.
Yeah. And so that was kind of a
it was a very satisfying start with that.
Yeah. And then we kind of just had my 2 comets, your king tiger and your Panzer IV trade shots for the rest of the game. My next comet that came on killed the Hetzer that had killed that comet, so I got a little bit of revenge. But it was kind of like you're trading what were my comets, like 400 points or something, and the Hetzer's like 180 or something like that off the top of my head. And so it's not exactly a worthwhile.
It's 210.
210. So it's not exactly a worthwhile trade. Brought my next comet on, blew up the Hetzer as a little bit of revenge, but when you consider that it's like 400 odd points for a comet, and it's what did you say, 200 and something for a Hetzer, Dom?
Yeah, 210 for a Hetzer.
Yeah, it's yeah, I mean that Hetzer definitely like doubled its value in what it killed before it got killed. And then we kind of had the battle of the AA guns, where my Crusader AA shot at your Kugelblitz, and then your Kugelblitz destroyed it, which makes sense when you look at the stats. The Crusader AA and the Kugelblitz are almost the same vehicle, except if you lower the stat by 1 for everything of the Kugelblitz, that's how you get the Crusader AA.
It was a little bit of justice served as well, because I used my crew skill of lead foot on my Kugelblitz, which is the first time in the whole tournament I actually used that. And you're like, oh, that's a interesting move. Don't know why you bothered doing that. Even though it put me on the road, and I also murdered your fun little AA boy there. So that was just a little bit of a got him.
Proved you wrong.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think from there we just kind of had this meme battle going on the left-hand side of the battlefield, where we just kept either missing each other or just not penetrating each other when we were shooting each other, until about, I think it was turn 4 when my outflankers came on. And I got my Daimler Dingo to come on the right-hand side of the field, and my Piat team on the left-hand side. And the Piat team took out your Panzer IV, and the Daimler and one of the Hetzers had this fun game where they just kept driving in circles around each other to try and get each other's rear armor. Now, was it the Hetzer that ended up killing the Daimler, or did the
Yes, the Hetzer ended up getting the decisive shot on the Daimler.
Yeah.
Whilst the Kugelblitz, it went on a little bit of a journey. It ended up actually on the way tussling with your free forward observer, who decided to keep attempting to assault despite being a singular man.
Yes. Now, if my free forward observer had rolled enough 6s in a row, he could glance the Kugelblitz in a tank assault. And so every turn, surprise charge tank assault against the Kugelblitz. And every turn I didn't roll enough 6s. Yeah, because I think I needed to roll like 4 or 5 6s in a row just to get a glancing hit.
It'd be like you had to pass the order test or morale test, whatever it is. Roll the 6 to hits, roll the D6 hits. No, or 4 or 5 or 6 if it hadn't moved. 6 if it had. And then goodness, yeah, another 6 to damage as well. And yeah, effectively you had to roll 4 sixes.
Yeah. And so that obviously did nothing. And I'm just kind of thinking, oh yeah, it's use Kugel Blitz, whatever, right? And I've got nothing in the middle of the field to challenge it. Meanwhile, my Comets are still battling the King Tiger and the Panzer IV. The Piats managed to take out a the Panzer IV, and so I'm thinking, all right, sweet. I've now got 2 super heavy anti-tank guns against 1 super heavy anti-tank gun. So I've got the edge over here. And that's when I realized, oh yeah, the Kugel Blitz exists, and he's driven to within 12 inches of the side armor of one of the Comets.
Yeah, his little journey, he decided to ignore that single man and continue on to see the side of the Comet. And despite the King Tiger taking, I think, probably 4 or 5 attempts over the whole game, shooting, I think the King Tiger actually hit quite a significant number of times, more than he missed.
But that
He
front armor
got
10, he just couldn't
double
get through.
penetration at one point, in fact,
Yeah.
which gave you an extra pin, turret jam, and then lit you on fire. And I just couldn't get that elusive second turret jam to kill you.
Yeah.
And little old Kugel Blitz just comes on the side, takes some shots, first time, destroys it.
And I think from that point onwards, the game was yours. I think at that point you had 4 kill points. And as the game was kill points, the max I could possibly get was 5 because that's how many you had. And
yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, and I think at that point the timer was running out as well. I think we just started turn 7, or we just finished turn 6 when the timer ran out.
Yes, and we rolled for a turn 7 and it wasn't to be. And
yes, that's right, because I needed a turn
so
7 to attempt for a draw.
yeah. And the turn 7 wouldn't have lasted long anyway, but
No.
yeah, at the end of the day, it ended up being in the Owen History tournaments records. It ended up being myself getting a massive victory to put myself of the Urban History crew at the top of the leaderboard.
Well, the top of the Owen History leaderboard, anyway.
Yes, the Owen History leaderboard, which on the tournament leaderboard put us at 6th. For me, second tournament, excellent effort. Much better than my first tournament. Brody, Ash, how did you guys finish up?
Well, despite being second place at the end of round 1 and 10th place at the end of round 2, I finished down at 17th.
Yeah, I'd much rather not go into detail about where I placed, but it wasn't wonderful considering my last tournament experience. I also completely forgot to mention in earlier rounds, or across all 3, I somehow managed, such was the quality or lack thereof of my dice rolls, to get a friendly fire foobar on every order test. Not every order test, on an order test in every round. So that sort of set the tone of my day, as was reflected by my overall placing. I think of about 3rd last.
To be fair, you did get to receive the first prize of the tournament since you had the first foobar of the tournament.
Yeah, and I think Theatre, who unfortunately couldn't join us here, had a similar experience to Brody and I. I think Theatre, who sadly couldn't join us tonight, had a similar experience to Arcadia and I, where he kind of had some good some good moments in games, but overall a disappointing result at the end of the day. Especially with his Pershing being kind of the mainstay of his force. I believe in one of his games, he lost a Pershing to the prep bomb. Don't quote me on that. I'm not 100% sure, but I think his second game, he lost his Pershing to the prep bomb, which is that's got to kill, losing a 300 odd point tank in a prep bomb. But
that pesky bombardment, hey.
Yeah, but I think the thing is, at any other tournament, if I came away with this result, I'd be like, man, what a waste of a day, what a terrible day. But I think one of the things I really really like about Western Front, and all the great sponsors they have, like War and Peace, Dark Castle Terrain, Warlord Games officially sponsors the events now as well. Um, is that everyone comes away with a prize, like. And so you can go out and play terribly all day, but you'll have a good day because the people you're playing against are great and you're going to walk away with a prize, you know. Even if you end up with a prize that's just some MDF terrain like I did. But, not saying it's a bad prize, just not one of the best ones on the table. But um, yeah, any final thoughts from anyone that they want to get out?
I guess for me, definitely practicing before a tournament would definitely help rather than just developing a list and going in blind with the hope and luck of God behind me.
Mm.
But I, having looked at a lot of the lists that were presented and that I played against, I definitely think spreading yourself across all areas, like what if I could do anti-infantry? What if I could do anti-aircraft? What if I could do anti-tank? I think if I could avoid that next time and just commit to one element, like anti-tank, anti-infantry, anti-aircraft, and don't spread myself so thin next time, that'd probably be more beneficial.
Mm.
Yeah, I found I guess final thoughts for me is that, well, of course, as we've already given them so much praise, is that the place to be for a real fun tournament is definitely the Western Front Gamers. Um, I am a bit hyped up to try some more competitive tournaments now,
Mm.
given my performance in this tournament. Although it could also be myself trying to swim in the deep end when I'm confident, but I'm wearing floaties because
Mm.
uh, my second win was against a new player, and my last win, although it was against a very experienced player, you could certainly have. There's certainly the what if element of what if he rolled a few less ones in that game.
Yeah.
Um, what? How could it have looked different? And things of that nature. So, like, it's certainly. I feel like it's certainly time I could take on a bigger tournament, like a more of a Moab, CanCon, something like that. Even the one up in Cairns, but I believe that's already passed this year.
They've got one more coming up in. So one of the tournaments up in Kansas passed. There's another one coming up in November.
All right, that's always good news. We'll keep an eye on that one. Even though there may be other things happening in November.
Mm.
That's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
But yeah, uh, this tournament was a good positive for myself as a getting more competitive in the bolt action scene, and certainly better. Yeah, good for me becoming more competitive in the bolt action arena, and Irvin, being a good friend of mine, certainly knows I'm a competitive boy,
Very
and so
much.
I don't mind really finding the opportunity to crack on in and test my skills against uh, some of the best, but also on one of the biggest stages in bolt action in Australia.
Mm. I think my final thoughts is I can copy the list that came first last year, but that doesn't mean anything if I don't know how to play it properly. And so, I copied closely the list that came first last year. Not exactly, because that list was fireflies rather than comets, but the two are very similar. But yeah, I having finished the last model in the army the day before the tournament, I didn't quite exactly have much time to practice with the list at all. And so I didn't quite know how my units worked with each. I knew how each unit worked. I didn't know how they worked together and made a good army. But yeah, you've probably heard us shout out Western Front quite a few times. But for those of you in Western Sydney, it's a great community. you know, heaps of support from them. And just the guys themselves are great. The group's growing a lot. They've got the next 6 months all mapped out with all themed events, and it's not just bolt action either. They've got a big Mordheim crew. They've got oh gosh, what's the game with the Hot Wheels cars? I think it's called Gas Dunes or
Gaslands.
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 Yeah, you can tell that's not my game, but yeah, they got Gaslands, Mordheim, Bolt Action. Yeah, so if you're keen, check them out. You can find them on Facebook. Just search Western Front Gamers. It's at West Ryde Anglican Church. Well, we'll leave it there. Thanks for watching, guys. Or listening, rather, I suppose. There's not going to be much to watch. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Please hit the like and subscribe. Really helps out the channel. And yeah, comment down below your experiences at tournaments. I'd love to hear them. Erwin from Erwin History signing off.